Okay, so are you ready to like dive into a world of just pure terror?
Oh, absolutely.
Today we're tackling the Ju-on franchise,
Yes.
or as some of you might know it, the Grudge.
Okay.
Um, and wow, you've sent over a literal mountain of articles and notes, so
A lot to cover.
it seems like you're really looking for the full picture on this chilling series. And trust me, I totally get it.
Yeah.
With all the different films and timelines and
Countries even.
even different countries involved,
Mhm.
it can feel like you're trapped in like a horror maze.
You're absolutely right. It can be a little confusing.
Right.
But what's so interesting is that the tangled chronology
Yeah.
isn't just like a filmmaking quirk. It actually mirrors the nature of the curse itself,
Wow.
creeping into lives in unexpected ways.
I didn't even think about it like that.
Yeah.
You've already piqued my curiosity.
Good.
So before we get lost in the maze, let's go back to the beginning.
Okay.
Ju-on, right? What does that even mean?
Ju-on translates directly to Curse of Grudge, which I think gives you a pretty good idea of what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, Curse of Grudge doesn't exactly sound like a walk in the park.
No,
Is there something specific about that word grudge that we should be paying attention to?
there is. To really understand Ju-on, we need to tap into some deep-rooted Japanese culture. In their folklore, they have this concept of onryo,
Okay.
which are basically vengeful spirits fueled by intense rage or sorrow.
Oh, okay.
These aren't your typical ghosts who just moan and rattle chains. They're forces of nature bent on revenge.
So we're not dealing with Casper here.
No, not at all.
These are some seriously angry spirits with a bone to pick.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea of a grudge, that lingering rage,
Yeah.
is that what fuels the entire horror of the Ju-on world?
Absolutely. This concept of a grudge, this enduring anger,
Oh,
is
yeah.
at the core of the entire story.
Yeah.
It's the engine that drives the haunting and the terror that unfolds.
Okay, now that we've got that cultural background,
Yeah.
let's talk about the films themselves.
Yep.
You mentioned that the timeline is all over the place, but where does this whole thing even begin?
Right.
My notes mentioned something about direct-to-video releases.
You're right on the money. The franchise actually started in 2000 with 2 direct-to-video films.
Wow.
Ju-on, The Curse, and its sequel. Can you imagine? This global phenomenon started small on VHS tapes with limited release.
Wow.
It's incredible how those humble beginnings gave rise to such a sprawling franchise.
It really shows the power of a good scare, huh?
It does.
But even with multiple films, there has to be one story, one event that kickstarts this whole curse. Tell me about the Saeki family tragedy.
Ah, yes, the heart of the horror. It's a story of jealousy and rage. Takeo Saeki, driven by suspicion, brutally murders his wife, Kayako, their son, Toshio, and even their cat.
Hold on, the cat too.
Yes.
Seriously. And the cat is part of the curse as well.
It might seem surprising,
Yeah.
but yes, the cat is very much part of the curse. And this often catches people off guard, but it really underscores just how indiscriminate and all-encompassing the curse is. It's not just about the human victims.
Right.
It's about the entire space becoming corrupted by this act of violence.
Right.
Anything and everything in that house becomes a vessel for the curse.
So it's not just a haunting, it's like this wave of raw negativity washing over everything. And there's something about that tragedy, that human element,
Yeah.
that feels so different from, say, a typical slasher film. It's like there's this deep sadness woven into the horror. Would you agree?
I couldn't have said it better myself. Ju-on isn't just about the shock value.
Yeah.
It's about the devastating consequences of actions.
Yeah.
The way that pain and anger can fester and transform into something monstrous.
Okay, so we've got this potent mix of cultural context and tragic backstory.
We do.
But now we have to talk about the structure of these films themselves.
Okay,
You mentioned it's nonlinear, and that's putting it mildly.
it is.
So help me out here. How do we navigate this web of Japanese films?
All right, let's break it down.
Okay.
As we said, it started with those 2 direct-to-video films.
Right.
Ju-on, The Curse, and its sequel. These introduce us to that infamous house and the fragmented way the story unfolds.
Okay.
Then in 2002, Ju-on, The Grudge hit theaters and became a smash hit, introducing a wider audience to that terrifying staircase scene.
Okay.
And to make things even more complex, 2003 brought us Ju-on, The Grudge 2, pushing the nonlinear structure even further.
See, even listing them out loud makes my head spin.
It's a lot.
So why is it so jumbled? Is there a meta to the madness?
It's not random chaos. It's a deliberate choice that perfectly mirrors the curse itself.
Oh, okay.
Just like the Grudge jumps around, infecting seemingly random people, the storytelling does the same.
Wow.
Leaving you feeling completely disoriented. It's like the curse is messing with your sense of time and order.
I'm starting to see how that would be so effective. It's not just the scares themselves, but the feeling that you're caught in a spiral with no way out.
Exactly. And this taps into a very primal fear. The fear of the unknown and the uncontrollable.
Oh, yeah.
By playing with our perception of time and reality, the films amplify that anxiety,
Right.
making the experience all the more unsettling.
Okay, before we dive too deep into the psychology of fear,
Yeah.
we need to address the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
The American remakes.
Oh, yes.
I mean, the 2004 The Grudge, directed by the original director himself,
Right.
was a huge box office success.
It was.
It proved that this Japanese horror concept had serious crossover appeal.
That's right. The first American remake did a fantastic job of capturing the essence of the original.
Yeah.
But you're also right. The
Yeah.
sequels, well, they didn't quite live up to the legacy.
To put it mildly.
Yeah.
The Grudge 2 tried to broaden the scope.
Yeah.
Grudge 3 went straight to video.
Straight to video.
And the 2020 reboot, let's just say it left audiences cold.
Yeah.
And yet, even with the less than stellar follow-ups,
Yeah.
this franchise keeps coming back.
It does.
We even got Sadako versus Kayako,
Yes.
a crossover that pitted the Ju-on curse against the Ring curse.
It's amazing. It's a testament to the enduring power of these characters and this concept. People are drawn to them,
Yeah.
even if it's for some campy crossover fun.
Right.
Which raises a really interesting question.
Yeah.
What is it about Ju-on, even with its ups and downs, that makes it so unforgettable?
Right.
What are those core elements that stick with you, even after the credits roll? Maybe that's a good place to pick things up after a quick break.
I love where you're going with this. We've got the backstory,
Yes.
the cultural context, and
Yeah.
now we need to understand what makes this franchise tick. So, dear listener,
Yeah.
grab a non-cursed drink and get ready for part 2, where we unpack the elements that make Ju-on such a chilling and effective horror experience.
Absolutely.
All right, welcome back. So let's get right back to those bone-chilling elements of Ju-on that make it such a uniquely terrifying experience. Where do we even begin? There's so many things that come to mind. The visuals, the sounds, that creepy kid.
You're absolutely right. There is a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
But I think it all starts with sound. That croaking, rattling sound that Kayako makes.
Right.
It's so primal, so unsettling. It gets under your skin in a way that few other horror sounds can.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that sound. I was reading an article that talked about how Shimizu,
Yeah.
the director,
Right.
was inspired by the sound of cats fighting.
Oh, wow.
He wanted to create something that was both familiar and utterly disturbing.
Yeah.
And I think he nailed it.
He did. That's a perfect example of Ju-on's minimalist brilliance.
Yeah.
Instead of relying on loud jump scares or excessive gore,
Right.
Shimizu uses simple but incredibly effective techniques.
Right.
That croaking sound bypasses logic and taps directly into our primal fear centers. It's the sound of something broken, something inhuman, and that makes it all the more terrifying.
Okay, so we've got the signature sound,
Yeah.
but there's another figure that haunts pretty much every film. Toshio, the ghost child.
Yes.
He's just as creepy as his mother,
Yeah.
but in a completely different way. He doesn't make a sound,
Right.
but his presence is chilling. Why do you think he's so effective?
Toshio is a masterclass in what's called the uncanny valley. He looks like a child, but his stillness, his blank stare,
Right.
it's unnerving because it's so off-putting. It taps into our innate fear of things that should be familiar but are just slightly wrong.
Right.
Just slightly. Not human.
That's like our brains are trying to process what we're seeing,
Yeah.
but something's just not clicking.
Exactly.
That disconnect is where the fear creeps in.
Yes.
And you know what else is seared into my memory?
What's that?
The staircase scene. Kayako all twisted and jerky, slowly crawling down the stairs.
Oh, yes.
It's become one of the most iconic images from the entire franchise.
Absolutely. The staircase scene is a brilliant example of visual storytelling in horror.
Yeah.
The slow, deliberate movement, the way the camera frames her.
Right.
It's pure dread. You know something terrible is about to happen, but there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop it.
Right.
It's terrifying because it taps into that primal fear of being hunted,
Right.
of being stalked by something relentless and unstoppable.
Yeah, what gets me is that These elements are so simple, so stripped down,
Yeah.
yet they're 1,000 times more effective than some big CGI monster or buckets of blood.
I agree.
It's like Ju-on understands that true horror comes from atmosphere,
Yeah.
from what's left unsaid, unseen.
You're absolutely right. It's about creating an atmosphere of unease, of creeping dread.
Right.
And that's something that the American remakes, for all their success,
Right.
sometimes struggled to replicate.
Yeah.
They often relied more on jump scares and visual effects, which, while effective in their own right, didn't quite capture the same sense of creeping psychological horror.
It's a good point. The Japanese films create this feeling of oppressive dread, like the curse is slowly suffocating you.
Yeah.
But there's something else going on here, too. Something deeper than just scares.
Yes.
Ju-on seems to be grappling with some pretty big themes.
It does.
Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. One of the most prominent themes is the inevitability of death.
Okay.
Once you're touched by the curse, there's no escape.
Wow.
It doesn't matter how good you are, how smart you are,
Right.
how fast you can run, the curse will find you.
Right.
It's a very bleak, very existential kind of horror that I think resonates with people on a deep level.
You know, I think this is where that idea of grudge, which we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
becomes really interesting.
Yeah.
It's not just about being haunted. It's about being trapped by the past,
Right.
by the weight of history.
That's a brilliant observation. And this connects to the Buddhist concept of karma,
Okay.
which is very much present in Japanese culture.
Mm-hmm.
In Buddhism, actions have consequences, and negative actions create negative karma,
Okay.
which can linger and impact future lives.
Right.
The Ju-on curse can be seen as a manifestation of that idea. It's karmic retribution for the violence that created it, and it spreads outward, relentlessly seeking balance.
Whoa. So we're not just dealing with ghosts here.
Yeah.
We're dealing with the echoes of trauma and rage
Exactly.
playing out across time and space.
Yes.
And that makes the whole thing even more terrifying.
Precisely. It's about the interconnectedness of things, the way that actions ripple outward,
Right.
creating consequences that can't be undone.
You mentioned the American films struggle to capture this complexity.
You did.
Is that because they were trying to appeal to a broader audience?
I think there's definitely a cultural context that's hard to translate.
Right.
The Japanese films are steeped in Japanese folklore and anxieties,
Right.
and that's something that might get lost in translation when trying to appeal to a wider global audience.
And even the whole non-linear storytelling thing.
Yeah.
I have to admit, even as a horror fan, I find it pretty challenging.
It can be.
Do you think that was a hurdle for American audiences?
It's certainly a unique style that can be disorienting, even for experienced horror fans.
Right.
But that disorientation is part of what makes the original film so effective.
Okay.
It puts you off balance,
Yeah.
makes you question what's real and what's not. It's a deliberate choice that reflects the nature of the curse itself.
Yeah.
Chaotic,
Okay.
unpredictable, inescapable.
So maybe the American sequels and remakes were trying to make things a bit more straightforward,
Maybe.
a bit more palatable.
Yeah.
But in doing so, they lost some of the raw, unsettling power of the originals.
It's possible. By simplifying things, by
Okay.
trying to explain everything, they might have inadvertently robbed the films of their mystery and ambiguity.
Which is really the heart of Ju-on, right?
Absolutely.
Things we don't understand, the things that lurk in the shadows.
Yes.
Those are the things that truly frighten us.
Exactly. Ju-on is a masterclass in using ambiguity and suggestion to create a truly terrifying experience.
So we've covered the origins, the structure, the elements that make it so effective.
We have.
What does this all mean for the franchise as a whole?
Right.
Where does it go from here?
Yeah.
What do you think, dear listener?
Yeah, what do you think?
What aspect of Ju-on do you find the most fascinating? The tragic backstories, the creepy atmosphere, the way it plays with time and reality.
Or maybe you're interested in the future of the franchise. Can it be revived, reimagined, without losing the essence of what made it so terrifying in the first place? These are all fascinating questions and ones that we'll explore further as our deep dive continues.
You know, while you were pondering those questions, I was thinking,
Yeah.
there are actually a bunch of Ju-on spin-offs and expansions
Are
that
ya?
we haven't even touched on yet.
Yeah.
It's like this franchise has its own sprawling universe just waiting to be explored.
That's a great point. For example, there are the Ju-on Black Ghost films from 2009.
Oh, yeah.
They explore separate but interconnected curses, adding
Wow.
a whole new layer to the Ju-on mythology.
It's like Ju-on has its own cinematic universe.
Right.
Kind of like Marvel, but way creepier.
Yes, exactly.
And then there's the Netflix series, Ju-on Origins.
That one takes a more grounded, almost psychological thriller approach to the story, doesn't it?
It does. Origins delves into the real-world darkness and trauma that could fuel such a haunting.
Yeah.
We see abuse, grief, isolation,
Right.
things that can scar people deeply,
Yeah.
leaving them vulnerable to the curse's influence.
Right.
It's disturbing because it makes the horror feel much more real,
Yeah.
much closer to home.
So it's not just about ghosts and jump scares.
No.
Origins seems to be saying that the most terrifying things are often the darkness that exists within ourselves.
Yeah,
The potential for cruelty and violence that lies dormant in all of us.
exactly. And that brings us back to the question of the franchise's future.
Right.
Can it be revived, reimagined for a new generation without losing the essence of what made it so terrifying in the first place?
Right.
The 2020 reboot, as we discussed,
Yeah.
didn't quite manage that balance.
It felt like it was trying too hard to update the formula, losing some of the original subtleness and psychological depth in the process.
So what would a successful revival look like? Any thoughts?
One idea that's been circulating is a prequel focusing on Kayako's life before the tragedy.
Oh, okay.
Imagine a film exploring her relationship with Takeo, showing the slow buildup of tension, the abuse that ultimately led to her horrific fate.
Oh,
It could add a whole new dimension of tragedy and complexity to the story.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
We'd see Kayako as a real person, not just a vengeful spirit.
Right.
We'd understand her pain, her rage, on a much deeper level.
Exactly.
It could humanize the story without sacrificing the horror.
I agree.
In fact, it might even make the horror more profound, because we'd see the human cost of the curse, the ripple effects of violence and trauma.
Exactly. It would tap into that core Ju-on theme of inescapable consequences, showing how the seeds of the curse were sown long before the murders took place.
Okay, I'm already hooked on the prequel idea.
Good.
But is there another direction the franchise could go in? Something that feels fresh and relevant to today's world?
Another intriguing concept is to explore how the Ju-on curse would manifest in today's hyper-connected world of social media,
Yeah.
instant communication, and constant surveillance. Could it spread through viral videos, haunted Zoom calls, or corrupted data files?
Whoa, that is both fascinating and terrifying.
It is, isn't it?
A viral curse. That's a nightmare scenario for the digital age.
It taps into our anxieties about technology, about losing control of our digital lives.
Right.
And it would allow the franchise to explore new avenues of fear, showing how an ancient curse could adapt and thrive in the modern world.
It would certainly be a way to refresh the franchise while staying true to its core themes of inescapable fate and the consequences of actions.
Absolutely.
So it seems like there's plenty of life left in the Ju-on franchise. It just needs the right creative minds to find new ways to tap into its potential.
I think so too.
But for now, dear listener, we've reached the end of our deep dive into this chilling and unforgettable world. Hopefully you've come away with a deeper appreciation for what makes Ju-on such a unique and enduring force in the horror genre.
I hope so.
But before you go, we'll leave you with this final thought. Be careful what you wish for when exploring abandoned houses,
Yes.
digging into dark family secrets,
Be careful.
or even scrolling through your social media feeds.
it could be anywhere.
You never know what grudge might be lurking in the shadows, waiting to be unleashed. Sweet dreams.